This is Jeanne Kitchens, Chief Technology Services Officer with Credential Engine, along with Sneha Dula, Solutions Developer with Credential Engine, and we're providing a demonstration of the Pathway Builder. We'll take you on a tour of the Pathway Builder so you can learn more about it, and we will actually build a pathway so you can get a really good idea about how to build your own pathways with the Pathway Builder. Now, to start off, when you're working with this tool, you're going to be logging into the Credential Registry publishing system. Sneha's already logged into the system. So now we're seeing the navigation, and we're going to select Tools, and we're going to go to the Pathway Builder. Once you select the Pathway Builder, you're going to select the organization that you're affiliated with. In this case, we're going to select Credential Engine and confirm. Now, another modal is going to automatically open, and this is where you're going to describe your pathway. And rather than watch us type in all of these CTDL terms here, we're going to go ahead and jump over to a pathway that we partially started and explain that modal window to you. So we're going to go ahead and click Edit Pathway Details, and let's walk through and take a look at this modal window. So we start off by looking at the very first CTDL term there, and that's pathway name. And you can see there's a red asterisk adjacent to it, and that means it's required. So whenever you see any of the editable modal windows with this tool, a red asterisk will always mean required. Everything else will be optional, and I'm always going to encourage you to include more information than just what is required to really help give a lot more context to your pathway. What is your pathway for? What is the purpose? So let's take a look. We've gone ahead and added the name, the description. The next thing you can add is a subject web page. If you have a public web page, this is where you should go ahead and add it, where people can learn more about your pathway. Don't ever include a pathway that URL that requires login. Make sure it's a public page, and you can see it's not required. So if there is no web page, it's not a problem. The next thing is industry type. And you'll also notice that adjacent to these CTDL terms, there's little question marks. And if you click the question mark, it will tell you more about it. In the United States, NAICS codes are industry types. We've already filled in a NAICS code here, but if there's another NAICS code you wanted to add, you could begin to type it. It will automatically look those up, and you could add one if it's applicable. And you don't have to use those codes. You could free type in there. So you'll notice the word medical is there. You could free type in an industry type that is pertinent to the pathway that you're going to build. You can add keywords, and keywords are great for search and discovery. And you simply would type in your keyword and then enter. Then you can enter occupation types. It is going to automatically search for standard occupation, or some people call them ONET codes. And if there's an applicable ONET code to your pathway, you should go ahead and start to type that in and select it, and it will go ahead and populate that information. But you don't have to select those codes. You just saw that Sneha actually free typed in nursing, so you can free type in whatever occupations are relevant to the pathway you're going to be building. You can combine those with occupation types from SOC codes or ONET codes or other countries' codes if you want. Instructional program type. Similarly, you'll start to see that all these fields that hold multiple CTDL terms are available to you to use. And this one is instructional program type, where it would be classification of instructional program in the US. If you type in a classification of instructional program, it will automatically start to search for those. And then you can go ahead and just select it and add it. Or you can always free type another program type in there. You do not have to use the classification of instructional program codes. So it's whatever is relevant to the pathway that you're going to build. Same with subjects. So subjects, you will type in any pertinent subjects that you want people to know that this pathway is related to. You can add as many as you like, by simply entering them and then hitting your return. You could add as many as you like. Support services is another great thing to add to a pathway. Now, this is data that is already published to the Credential Registry. So you would have already published support services to the Credential Registry. And in this particular example, I've already published a nursing occupation support service to the registry. It's going to do a search. Now it's just going to begin typing in the name of that support service, and it will find it. Then you simply select it, and it will add it. And you can tell when things are added because they have that nice blue background around them. And you can tell it's all filled in. And if you added something and you change your mind, or you say, well, this really isn't applicable, you could always click the X adjacent to it and remove it. But we're going to go ahead and add those support services here so we can see we can just as easily re-add them. And then finally, progression models. In this example demo, we are not going to add a progression model. There are other videos available for you to learn more about progression models that can add some really important context to your pathway as well. So let's go ahead and save. And now that we saved, we're going to take a little tour of the board. This is the pathway builder that you're seeing here. And if you, when you start your own pathway, as I said, you would automatically see that modal window where you're going to select your organization. You're going to automatically edit pathway details, and then you would be presented with another modal to search the registry, but we're going to take a look at that in just a moment. So let's go ahead and start with the header. And the header is the very top of the board. You see Pathway Builder. Adjacent to it, you will see the name of the pathway that you created and the name of the publisher. So we're Credential Engine. We're working in our sandbox for a demonstration in a certified nurse assistant micro pathway. Just below that, we can see that we can always go back and edit our pathway details. So that's that modal that we just looked at. Then to the right of it, we see more. We can save our pathway. Now it will automatically save approximately every 5 minutes, but I encourage you to go ahead and use the save button as you're working on your pathway to save your work, and especially before exiting, which is the next button. When you're done working on your pathway, you could always return to it. You don't have to complete it in one sitting. You can take as much time as you like. When you're done, be sure and save it, and then you can exit. Adjacent to the exit, we see kind of a grayed out area, but you can make out that it says show conflicts. And we don't have any conflicts right now to show, but if we did, they would be building up in that queue there. It would become enabled. You would see a flag there you could open up, and then you could read all those conflicts. And we'll take a look at what those messages look like on the board in a little bit. And then once you build your pathway, you approve it. So once you approve it, it could be published to the registry. Then we can look at settings. And settings right now include turning a grid on and off. And the grid puts little blue dotted lines around your cards. You can print it. Then we can share it. That's that share icon. After we approve it, this is going to be a link to share it in the credential finder. And then finally, we see help. The question mark is help. And this is where all the resources to help you build your pathway, including this video, are available. You see there's a table of contents there. You can go through any of those areas about the pathway builder. Each one of those table of contents has text, it has Google Slides, and it has a recorded video. And then we can also see that we have a playlist embedded there. This is our YouTube channel with the instructional and guidance videos for the Pathway Builder. So all of these resources are always here for you, and they're also available on the Credential Engine main site as well. Okay, let's go ahead and close that. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look at the pathway progression just below the header. And that's a gray bar. Adjacent to it, there's blue, and we see the word pathway, and then we see destination component. And the destination component is always going to be on the far right It's a column that will always hold only one card when we're building a pathway. There's only one pathway component that will be our destination component. And then the pathway area to the left of that is where we could add the pathway components. We call those pathway components cards on the board here. You can see there's a few cards there laid out on the board already. If there was a progression model, the levels in the progression model would show there instead of pathway. So that's the pathway progression, and the board is that area below it. So the board is where we drag and we drop our cards and we build our pathway. We begin to connect them left to right toward the destination. And then finally on the left rail, which is to the left of the board where we're going to be dragging and dropping and doing our work. This is our left rail where we can search registry resources. And we're going to do that in just a moment. And we're going to see that that's where we queue the selected resources, and we'll also be taking a look at the components. So let's go ahead and do a registry search. And what we're going to do is we're going to build a pathway that's going to combine data in the Credential registry. So that's published data. It's already in the registry, with data that are components that will not have data in the registry. So we'll go ahead and we'll do both. And what this search does, as you can see, is we can do some filtering. And we're going to go ahead and search for resources that our organization has published. But I can also search for resources published by other organizations. Like, for example, if I'm building a pathway with maybe certifications offered by another organization, I would uncheck that box and I could search for those resources. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and check it. And then at the top there, we see a filter, and that filter says all resources. But if we drop it down, we can search for specific types of resources in the registry. So filters are optional. You could also just begin typing in keywords and the search will begin working. But we have some specific resources that we want to find to build this pathway. And we're going to start with selecting a credential, and we're going to select a certified nurse assistant micro pathway credential. And to do that, we've done our search, and Sneha clicks the plus button, and it added there to the right-hand side. So all of the resources that we want to select will populate that little right side queue there. Now we're going to select a course called Medical Terminology. We do a search, we click the plus, and it's going to pop over there to the right side. And now we're going to search a competency called Applies Medical Terminology on the job. Coded notations, CNA 1.1, and see I hit the plus, and that's good for now. We're going to go ahead and add just those 3 resources and click Done Adding. Now we have dropped those resources into our left rail. You can see them right there. If we would have selected more, they all would have dropped in there directly from the Credential registry. So that means these are all completely pre-filled in with data. You do not have to change them. You don't have to add any information if you don't want to those cards. The data is already in the registry, and now it's also a pathway component. So those are resources from the registry, and we know that we can always return to that search registry resources there in the left rail anytime to add more. But let's take a look to the next tab called Components. And here we can see all of the types of components that we can use to build pathways with in the pathway board. These are all drag and drop onto the board, what we call cards. We can see that they're in alphabetical order. We could see they're color coded with icons. They all have question marks. So if I click any of the question marks, I can get the definition for that CTDL pathway component. And the exception to being in alphabetical order, of course, is at the very bottom, where it's condition card, and we're going to talk more about conditions in part of this demo. And the other one is the blue credential card. So all the cards are white except for the credential that is always blue, and the condition that is always this kind of yellow-orange color. And when you drag those cards onto the board, they maintain those icons. You always see the name of the type of component that they are, that stays. And if there is the color coding there, you can see, for example, there's already a credential on the board, and that's blue. So all that stays. Now, if we look to the board, we can see that Sneha and I already started a pathway. So we searched the registry, we brought in some resources, and I know which resources came from the registry because the names of them on the cards are filled in and they're underlined because it's a hyperlink. So the names are linked to the credential finder, where you can see the information published about that card. So what we're seeing here on the board is, let's go ahead and look to the very far right side where I mentioned that credential. So here we brought in a credential from the registry, and this is our destination component for this particular pathway. And for this particular pathway, it's a license, so an occupational license for a certified nurse assistant. And then to the left of those cards, we can see that we have an assessment, and that was as another resource from the registry. And we can see that there's an arrow connecting that assessment, or what we call a connector, connecting that assessment, and it's pointing to that credential, because we're always going to be pointing our connectors to the destination component. And then we see two courses that are stacked up, and below that, work experience. And again, I can tell that the course cards were dragged in from the registry because of the hyperlink to the credential finder, and the work experience is a component that I pulled in from the component library and I edited it. So here we just have a starter of some cards, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to add to this. We're going to build in our connectors and make a little mini pathway. So first of all, we're going to start off with our first level of expression that's with only connectors, and then we'll add a condition and constraint, and those are second and third levels of expression. For levels of expression, we do not have to include conditions. They are entirely optional, and so are constraints. So let's just go ahead and show everyone, see what it looks like to turn the grid on and off. Let's take a look at that. So if it's helpful, you can turn the grid on, and when you're placing cards, you're going to notice that they're always going to neatly drop into a grid. You're never going to drop a card onto the crosshairs of the grid. It's going to always land nice and centered, kind of toward the top of the rectangles that you see. So you know now about this option, but let's go ahead and turn that grid off. So we just go back up there and we turn it off. Okay, let's drag and drop some cards onto the board. We're going to go to our selected resources, and we're going to begin with our course. And we're going to drag our course over, medical terminology. And we're going to start a little stack with our medical terminology course, and we're going to drag a credential to the right of our course. And just below our course, we are going to place our competency. Now, when we're building our pathway on the board like this, you know, we would have done a little upfront thinking, we would have done some planning and analysis. So we've already done that. Sneha and I have already done an analysis. We've done some planning, thinking about how to lay out this pathway. And that's why we're easily able to drag them where we want to. But, you know, you can change your pathway. You can change your ideas. We can move these cards around if Sneha wanted to, for example, you know, pull that over, or pull the competency card down. She could rearrange. So when you drop a card, know that you can rearrange them. And we're going to recommend that you first lay out your cards before adding your connectors. So those are our components. We'll go ahead and put them back to how we're thinking we want to lay out this pathway. And we're going to go ahead and grab another component or two from the component library. And we're going to begin by dragging a co-curricular component. And we're going to put that below between the course and the competency. Go ahead and move that up between the course and the competency up. So you can see how you can rearrange the cards. You know, they're not, once you drop them, you're not stuck with them there. You can move them around. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and you can see, first of all, there's a red outline around that card. That means it's empty and we must edit it. So we're going to go ahead and click those three little dots in the top right corner and click edit. So the component library is all empty components that you have to create. So we're going to begin by naming it, and we're going to name it Nursing Expo. And we're going to describe it as participate with the Nursing Expo. And we're going to add a component category. And in this example, the component category is going to be work-based learning. And I want to point out those question marks. So again, we can click on the question marks to get the definition of the CTDL term. When you are editing these modal windows that are specific to each type of component, you are seeing the CTDL and you're filling in the content for describing, in this case, the co-curricular component. So let's go ahead and save that component. We're going to see that red outline has disappeared. It now has the Nursing Expo name there on the card, and we are good to go with that. And we're going to move on to the let's see, let's go ahead and move that credential back over to the left there. And let's go ahead and add an assessment. And we're going to put that, yes, between the course and the credential. And we could leave it like that, or as Sneha had that card, she could pull that back over to the right and we could tighten up our card stacks if we wanted to. It's really up to you. You know, the purpose of this demo is just to show that you can move your cards around and how to build. Now, the component that we just brought in, the assessment, we see that red outline, so we know we have to edit it. Now, we're going to do something really cool here. We are not only going to add an assessment component, but we're going to create a registry resource. So when we're talking about pathway components, they're really proxies for the resource in the registry. So this is going to do double duty. We're going to begin by toggling the little toggle there to the right. It turns blue, means we can create a registry resource and an assessment component at the same time. So we're going to fill in the required fields, and you're going to notice, see, I was just going to go ahead and start filling that in. You're going to notice that there's a lot more required fields to meet the minimum data policy for the registry. And you're only going to do this when that resource doesn't already exist in the registry. So this is really great if you're designing a new pathway, for example, and the data is not published to the registry yet. And you can do this with assessments, courses, and credentials. So yep, see, I was just going to go ahead and fill in the required data per our minimum data policy for the credential registry. And it's going to automatically fill in that owned by. So you should only be publishing resources that you own and or you offer. And so that's what Sneha is doing. We're indicating that, you know, Credential Engine, which of course for this demonstration, this is demonstration purposes only, offers it. Notice you have to add language, and it automatically autofilled, and Sneha picked English in the United States. And you also notice with the red asterisk here that you have to indicate either where it's available at or an available listing. And those are both URLs. And she put the URL in. And again, you could always click those question marks and add additional information. And now we can just go ahead and publish that resource. So this is publishing on the fly to the Credential Registry. And you just saw the message on the board there. It indicated that it was saving it, and it's going to indicate that it is published to the registry. And then it's going to let us go ahead and save that component. Now, once you have published, in this example, this assessment to the registry, that assessment has also become available in the publishing system. So you could always add more information to it beyond the minimum required data at any time. So you can expand that information, but through this tool, you will only add the minimum required data. So there it published, it's published to the registry. Automatically, it'll be showing up in the credential finder in just a couple of minutes. And now we're going to click Save Component. So it's really important. You're publishing to the registry and saving that component. So you're doing both. So go ahead, let's save it. And it's saved. And there it is. That red outline is gone. It is now linked to that assessment in the credential finder. And that is just fantastic. It did double duty for us. There it is. Yeah, that's fantastic. In building our pathway. So we've laid out our cards, and the next step after laying out your cards is to connect them. And we're going to connect them with what we call the connectors. They all have arrows, and those connectors are going to go left to right. So we're going to start from the left side here. And what Sneha's going to do is she's going to be clicking on what we call a parent card. Parent card is always going to be to the left of another card, and we're going to start connecting our cards. Because what we're going to be doing is we want to indicate that this course and the co-curricular and the competency there, that assessment is for those three things there. So we're going to go ahead and click the course on the left, and then click the orange dot, and then the assessment on the right. So we're starting left to right, and we're just clicking those orange circles, and then added those connectors. And Sneha's going to go ahead and just keep building here. We want to indicate that our assessment is required for this micro credential. And then we need to go ahead and finish our other arrows to connect our other courses that we had already dropped on the board in the work experience. And similarly, those are going to connect to the adjacent assessment. So this pathway is telling us that we're going to complete, beginning on the top left there, the course, the co-curricular, and the competency requirement. And then we're going to complete another set of courses and a work experience requirement in order to earn our destination goal, and that is our occupational license. And obviously, this is an example. You would take more courses than this, but here we've created a nice mini pathway example with our first level of expression using only connectors. And it's been auto-saving, but we should always save our work, of course. And now let's go ahead and move on to our next level of expression. We're going to go ahead and we're going to remove a couple of arrows. Sneha's going to go ahead and do that. And to remove arrows, you see that Sneha's clicking on the connector icon there, and it's displaying the arrow. It's telling you what that arrow is pointing to. And she's simply clicking the little X there that lets you remove that arrow. And so the other great thing is you can move your cards around, you can connect arrows, and you know what? You can disconnect those arrows and you can reconnect them and change them around. And in this particular case, we're going to demonstrate our next level expression, which is adding a condition. So we are going to drag and drop the condition from our component library, and we're going to put it before the assessment there. And we're going to describe the conditions that need to be present before completing the assessment. So Sneha, click those three little dots. She opened the modal window that always opens on the right, and the modal window is always going to be in respect to the card that you're working on. In this case, it's a component condition. Wherever it's red is required. So we're going to give it a name. And that's medical terminology requirements. This first part of our pathway is focused on medical terminology. And we do not have to include a description, but I would highly recommend it. So we're going to go ahead and describe the condition here. And in this particular case, we're going to say that you have to complete the course and the co-curricular requirement and demonstrate competency to proceed. So we're going to go ahead and put that description in, and now notice that you have to put a required target components. So the target components are always to the left of the condition. And in this case, we're talking about the course, the credential, and the competency. And we're saying all three are required. So we're going to put in the number 3. Now, if only 2 of those things were required, or 1, let's say only the course was required, or you could do the course or the co-curricular, then you would indicate you can complete the course or the co-curricular, and it would be 1. So but in this case, it's 3, and we can save our condition. And when we save our condition, it's going to populate it. So you'll notice as we're saving information, it's populating it there into the card, it's saving it in the card, and we can see it appear on the card without having to click the edit modal. Now, our third level of expression is what we call a constraint. And constraints are always added to conditions. So if you want to include conditions, you can do that without having constraints. But when you add a constraint, you're always having to add it to a condition. So first you have to have the required fields filled in for the condition, and then you can click add constraint. And for this example, we're going to add a constraint that the grade is equal to or greater than passing. That is our left source, and we have question marks here again that explain what I'm telling you here. So the left source, we want to think about it how we would grammatically say something left to right, and it's always going to be in these 3s with the comparator in the middle. And if see how it clicks that drop down again for the comparator, you will recognize this as, you know, a simple math equation that you've known for years. So that is a controlled vocabulary where you have to pick equal to, greater than equal to, less than equal to, or not equal to. So, and you pick whichever applies, whichever is most applicable, and your left source and your right source are whatever you need it to be. It's your pathway. You decide what it should be. In this case, for this pathway, it's grade greater than or equal to passing, and then we can save that constraint. Now, we could add another constraint. We could add as many constraints as we want. So we could add another constraint, and for this one, we're going to say the nursing expo is equal to confirmed participation. And that means that, you know, a person would have had some kind of evidence, right, that they participated in this nursing expo at a, you know, at a level acceptable, and we can save. Okay. Now, in this particular video, I'm not going to get into, you may have noticed the action properties there. We'll do that. We'll do that in another video when we get into more complex pathways. But for this video, we're just going to look at adding individual constraints, and we can go ahead and save them. Now we have added another card, we took away some arrows, and we need to add some arrows back. So we're going to go ahead and connect our course. Don't connect that arrow yet. Let's connect our course. Let's connect our co-curricular and our competency. to our condition. And let's see what happens if we try to save it and approve it with a missing arrow. So we have saved the pathway, and notice that now we have a conflict, show one conflict. And if we were to click approve, it wouldn't, well, we can't. It's approve is grayed out because we have a conflict there that we need to fix. And we can see from the message here that it's telling us we need to add that connector. So we can go ahead and click the X to move that out of the way. And of course, that's not going to clear it. What's going to clear it is adding that connector there. And we can resave it. And once we have saved it, there's that conflict, it went away. Now we can go ahead and approve it. Now, once you approve it, the data gets published to the Credential Registry. We definitely want to agree to that. And we're going to take a look at what that looks like in the Credential Finder. But before we do, let's go ahead and take a look at what highlighting cards means. If you double click on any card that has connectors, it will highlight in blue on the connectors and around the card all the direct connections. So Sneha double click that assessment card, and you could see that it highlighted in blue all the connections from left to right. And if Sneha does that to any other card, it will unhighlight the card that she had previously picked, and it's going to go ahead and show you all the direct connections. So it's another way to kind of, get to know your pathway, demonstrate your pathway, understand the connections of the pathway as well. And so now if you were just to go ahead and click that other credential there on the top, we would see its direct connection. So it's only the direct connections to from the card that you double clicked on, and you could redouble click on it to turn it off, or double click some other card, and it will highlight those connections to and from that card. Okay, so now that we have saved and approved our pathway, we can share it via the share icon. We can copy paste the link from that, and we can go to the Credential Finder, and we can see what the pathway looks like in the Credential Finder. So here it is. Here's our pathway. On this detailed page, first we're seeing a listing of the pathway components. So if you scroll down, we can see all of the components that we use to build our pathway are right there. And if there's a link, it means that that's going to link to that resource in the Credential Finder. And we can scroll back up, and we can see the other tabs are progression levels and details. We didn't publish any progression levels. The details is where we can get more information from the pathway description that we put in, and get the CTID for the pathway. And then we'll scroll back up, and we'll actually be able to open the pathway in the viewer. So you can see it is the same pathway that you built. However, nobody can edit it. You don't have any of the modals for editing. What you do have are modals. So if we view the pathway details, we'll see all the information that we added there to the description of the pathway. And if you open any of the components up, you can see those details. If you follow any of the URLs there on the cards, it will go directly to that resources page in the Credential Finder. So that is our demonstration for the Pathway Builder tool. Thank you so much for watching.